Now, they not only published that, they published where they presented some of this work. For those in the front, you can see up close, in 1970, this was published in, it was presented in Mol, Belgium in 1970 in front of NATO military scientists at a symposium entitled The Uptake of Informative Molecules by Living Cells. And on the evening of July 10th, when Dr. Robert Gallo gave an open forum presentation in Vancouver at the 11th International Conference on AIDS, and that day I had done a radio interview in Vancouver, and there was a documentary film crew there filming a vaccine documentary, and they informed me that Dr. Gallo was going to be giving a presentation in the public forum, and I said, and they asked me, would you care to join us? We're going to tape, and would you care to ask Dr. Gallo a question regarding his research? So I said I would, and I stood up, questions and answer session, and I said, Dr. Gallo, are you at all concerned that your early research, taking monkey viruses and recombining them with things like feline leukemia virus, RNA, and chicken leukemia sarcoma virus RNA, might have given rise to the AIDS virus or its progenitors, which, through contamination of monkeys supplied by your colleagues from Lytton Bionetics Research Laboratories to the vaccine manufacturers at Merck Sharp and Dohme, might have caused the contamination of vaccines simultaneously administered to gay men, Willowbrook State School mentally retarded children on Staten Island, both in New York, and blacks in Central Africa. That was in 1974. Well, Dr. Gallo got very angry. He got very, very angry. In essence, he said that I should go back and get a grade 101 level of biological science training, high school level, and denied that there was any relevance of this work to NATO military scientists, that he said that, oh, yes, I was there, but these meetings, they talk about motherhood and fatherhood and sisterhood and brotherhood, and that clearly I was in the wrong. Well, at the end of that meeting, many of the press people came up to me, and Dr. Robert Gallo left quite hastily, and somebody handed him a flyer on the way out, a flyer that contained information about the book Emerging Viruses. And he happened to see that there was the foreword by W. John Martin, who's one of the world's leading vaccine contamination analysts, who worked as the FDA's Bureau of Biologics Director between 1976 and 1980, in charge of testing human vaccines for contamination, who happened to have rented a room in Dr. Gallo's house for some time and was personal friends with Gallo. And then on the back of the flyer, he noticed that there was a testimonial raving the book by the hero to those Gulf War veterans who are coming down with chronic fatigue, Gulf War syndrome, Dr. Garth Nicholson. And Dr. Garth Nicholson is Dr. Robert Gallo's was Dr. Robert Gallo's counterpart at MD Anderson Cancer Research Center, and the two had been involved together in that special virus cancer program, and both had worked at least with people who worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland, America's and the world's leading biological weapons testing center. So he calls Garth Nicholson. He's personal friends with Garth. He says, Garth, just paraphrase, I didn't hear this conversation, I just heard it secondhand from Dr. Nicholson. He says, what the heck are you doing giving this fellow who's obviously crazy a testimonial like this? Well, in no uncertain terms, Dr. Nicholson said, Bob, he's not crazy. He's a Harvard graduate, and have you read his book? Gallo said, no. Nicholson said, well, Bob, you better read his book. So here's his number. So on July 30th, in the morning, my phone rings. Pick up the phone. This is Gallo. And he begins to tell me, first of all, he apologizes for saying what he said about me. And he begins to tell me that he's not a bad man, that he's a humanitarian like myself, and that he had only minimal association with Lytton Bionetics Research Laboratories, and that he had only minor connections to people who worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland in biological weapons, and that he raised 5 specific objections to my thesis. When I went to check those objections out in the weeks ahead, they were scientifically bogus. I'll just tell them to you really briefly so that you know, and that the people who are listening at home will understand what the disinformation that is going to be spread if and when this information ever comes out. That these viruses that I just showed you, he says, could never have combined. They did not have the, quote, homology. That is the likeness, the similarities needed to combine. That is absolute hogwash. If you go into this research literature, all of Dr. Gallo's mentors said that they could combine. They combined them, and in fact, Dr. Robert Gallo and his own research teams at Bionetics combined.
The subject has to switch to a diametrically opposed attitude. Any questions?
Choice. The boy has no real choice, has he? Self-interest. The fear of physical pain drove him to that grotesque act of self-abasement. Its insincerity was clearly to be seen. He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
Padre, these are subtleties. We're not concerned with motives, with a higher ethics. We are concerned only with cutting down crime. And with relieving the ghastly congestion in our prisons. He will be your true Christian, ready to turn the other cheek, ready to be crucified rather than crucify, sick to the very heart at the thought even of killing a fly. Reclamation, joy before the angels of God. The point is that it works.
And the very next day, your friend and humble narrator was a free man.
Find them.
Our task is to make sure that this is not the triumph of superior might, but the triumph of superior morality. We're in a very interesting position here. We're in a position to fashion a future in which aggressive war will be dealt with as a crime.
Hear, hear.